I never thought I would watch my own brother destroy my 16-year-old son's life, while my parents stood by and did absolutely nothing to stop it. The scene still burns in my memory, like acid. Tyler, my boy, being dragged away in handcuffs from what was supposed to be a peaceful Sunday barbecue at my childhood home. The metal cuffs cutting into his wrists as he screamed my name, begging me to help him. Marcus, my younger brother, pointing his finger at Tyler while whispering something to the police officers. And there on the porch, watching it all unfold like some twisted theater performance, stood my parents. Silent, unmoved, complicit. My name is Brett Williamson, and 3 months before that horrific Sunday, I thought I knew my family. I was 34 years old, running a successful accounting firm in the next county over, married to Sarah for 15 years, and father to Tyler and his younger sister Emma. Life felt stable, predictable, good. The trouble started when $30,000 worth of construction equipment vanished from Williamson Construction. The family business my father Robert had built from nothing over 3 decades. Excavator attachments, high-end power tools, industrial generators, surveying equipment. All of it disappeared overnight from our secure storage facility on the outskirts of town. Marcus had recently been promoted to operations manager, a position I thought he had earned through years of dedication to the company. He called an emergency family meeting the morning after discovering the theft, his face grave with concern, as we gathered in the conference room above the main office. I hate to say this. Marcus began running his hands through his dark hair. But we need to consider all possibilities here. These thieves knew exactly what to take and when to take it. This wasn't some random break-in. My father nodded slowly, his weathered face creased with worry. At 62, Robert Williamson still commanded respect in our small town. He had built Williamson Construction through honest work and fair dealing, earning contracts for everything from residential developments to municipal projects. "What are you suggesting, son?" Robert asked. "I'm saying someone with inside knowledge had to be involved. Someone who knew our security protocols, our inventory system, our schedules." Marcus paused dramatically, letting his words sink in. "Dad, I've been reviewing our personnel files and summer employee records. Tyler has been working at construction sites all summer, different companies moving around quite a bit." My blood began to boil. "Are you seriously suggesting my 16-year-old son orchestrated a $30,000 theft?" "I'm not suggesting anything," Marcus replied with false sincerity. "I'm just presenting facts. Tyler has had access to information about our operations. He knows the layout of our facility. And honestly, Brett, some of the other workers have mentioned seeing him asking questions about equipment values and storage procedures." Sarah shifted uncomfortably beside me. My mother, Patricia, reached across the table and patted Marcus's hand supportively. The family dynamics were crystallizing before my eyes in ways I had never wanted to acknowledge. "That's ridiculous," I said firmly. "Tyler has been working construction jobs to save money for college. He's learning about the industry because he wants to understand the family business. Since when is curiosity a crime?" "No one is saying it's a crime," my father interjected. "But Marcus raises valid concerns. We need to explore every angle." Over the next week, Marcus presented what he called evidence. Security footage that supposedly showed Tyler near the storage facility the evening before the theft was discovered. Witness statements from workers claiming Tyler had asked suspicious questions about equipment. Timesheets showing Tyler had worked late that particular Friday. I defended my son at every turn, but I could see the family choosing sides. Robert and Patricia, who had always favored Marcus, began treating Tyler with cold suspicion during our weekly family dinners. They would watch him carefully, as if expecting him to confess or betray some guilty knowledge. The breaking point came when Marcus suggested we hire a private investigator to look into Tyler's activities. The implication was clear: they believed my son was a thief. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I decided to conduct my own investigation not to prove Tyler's innocence, which I never doubted, but to find the real culprit and clear my son's name once and for all. I started by reviewing the company's financial records, something my accounting background made relatively simple. What I discovered made my stomach turn. Equipment purchases over the past 6 months didn't match our inventory records. Tools that should have been in storage were listed as still being on job sites that had been completed weeks earlier. Purchase orders for materials that never arrived at their intended destinations. When I confronted Marcus with these discrepancies during a private conversation in his office, his reaction was immediate and defensive. "You're questioning my management now," he snapped, standing up from his desk. "I've been keeping this company running while you play accountant in your fancy office across town." "I'm questioning irregularities in our books," I replied calmly. "These numbers don't add up, Marcus. Either we have a serious inventory control problem or something else is going on. Maybe you should focus on controlling your son instead of micromanaging my department." He shot back. That response told me everything I needed to know. Marcus was hiding something, and he was using Tyler as a shield to deflect scrutiny from his own activities. I spent the next 2 weeks digging deeper, following paper trails and cross-referencing records. What I uncovered was devastating. The missing equipment had never been stolen at all. It had been systematically sold off the books over a period of months, with the proceeds disappearing into accounts I couldn't trace. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. Hidden in a folder of routine delivery receipts, I found documents bearing Tyler's forged signature. Someone had been creating fake timesheets, fake work orders, and fake delivery confirmations, all designed to build a paper trail implicating my son in the systematic theft of company property. The forger was skilled, but not perfect. Under close examination, the signatures showed subtle differences in pen pressure and letter formation that any handwriting expert would easily identify as fraudulent. Marcus hadn't just been stealing from the family business. He had been methodically constructing a case against Tyler, preparing to sacrifice my 16-year-old son to cover his own crimes. I gathered every piece of evidence I could find and requested an urgent family meeting. I walked into my parents' house that evening carrying a manila folder full of documentation that would expose Marcus's crimes and clear Tyler's name. I expected shock outrage, maybe even gratitude for uncovering the truth. Instead, I walked into an ambush. My parents were waiting in the living room with Marcus, their expressions grim and prepared. Robert gestured for me to sit in the single chair they had positioned, facing the couch where the three of them sat together like a tribunal. "We need to talk, son," Robert began in his most serious voice. "Yes, we do," I agreed, opening my folder. "I have evidence that Marcus has been embezzling from the company and framing Tyler for his crimes." The silence that followed was deafening. I looked up from my papers to find 3 faces staring back at me with something approaching pity. "Ugh. Brett," my mother said softly. "We know about Marcus's situation." The words hit me like a physical blow. "You know." Robert leaned forward, his hands clasped together. "We've known about his financial problems for months. The gambling, the debt, the poor decisions. We've been working with him to address these issues privately." Privately? I could barely form words. "He's been stealing from us, from our family business, and you've been covering it up." Marcus finally spoke, his voice filled with manufactured remorse. "Brett, I made mistakes. Serious mistakes. But I'm getting help now. Dad and Mom have been supporting me through some tough times. I'm in counseling, I'm attending meetings, I'm making progress." "You're making progress?" My voice was rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "You forged my son's signature on fraudulent documents. You've been systematically stealing equipment and selling it. You've set up an elaborate scheme to frame a 16-year-old boy for felony theft." "Now hold on," Robert interjected sharply. "No one is framing anyone for anything." Patricia reached into her purse and pulled out a tissue, dabbing at her eyes. We all know Tyler is a good boy, but he's been running with some questionable friends lately, and some of his behavior has been concerning. I stared at my mother in disbelief. What are you talking about? The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the sudden interest in expensive things, she continued. We've been watching Brett. We see more than you think we see. Marcus nodded gravely. I tried to give Tyler the benefit of the doubt, but the evidence kept mounting. I found him in the storage facility after hours on 2 separate occasions. He claimed he was just looking around, but why would he need to be there at night? Because he's interested in learning about construction, I said through gritted teeth. Because this is his family's business and he wants to understand how it works. Or because he was scouting for his next theft, Robert said quietly. The betrayal was complete. My own parents had chosen to believe Marcus's lies over their own grandson's innocence. They had chosen to protect the family business reputation over Tyler's future. You planned this, I realized aloud. The 3 of you planned to sacrifice Tyler to protect Marcus and the company. Robert stood up, his face flushed with anger. We planned to handle a difficult situation as quietly and privately as possible. Marcus has agreed to make full restitution over time. He's committed to getting help for his problems. The family business will survive and continue to provide for all of us. And Tyler, I asked. Tyler made choices, Patricia said firmly. He'll face consequences for those choices, but he's young. He'll learn from this experience and move on with his life. I looked around the room at these people who had raised me, who I had loved and respected my entire life, and I realized I didn't know them at all. The evidence proves Marcus is guilty and Tyler is innocent, I said, holding up the folder. The evidence proves that Marcus has been struggling and made some poor decisions, Robert corrected. It also shows that Tyler has been involved in activities he shouldn't have been involved in. The situation is complicated, but we're handling it as a family. Marcus leaned forward with crocodile tears in his eyes. Brett, I know this is hard to understand, but Tyler approached me about 3 months ago. He said he needed money for college and wondered if there were ways to make extra cash around the construction sites. I should have said no immediately, but I felt bad for the kid. I gave him some small tasks, some overtime opportunities. Things escalated from there. The lie was so smoothly delivered, so perfectly crafted to contain just enough truth to sound plausible, that I finally understood the depth of Marcus's manipulative abilities. You're saying Tyler orchestrated this theft? I asked. I'm saying Tyler got in over his head and I enabled him by not stopping it sooner, Marcus replied with practiced humility. My parents nodded approvingly at this version of events. It painted Marcus as a flawed but caring uncle who had made the mistake of trusting Tyler too much while casting Tyler as a greedy teenager who had exploited that trust. This is insane, I said, standing up abruptly. You're all living in a fantasy world. The evidence clearly shows. The evidence shows what we need it to show, Robert interrupted coldly. And right now we need this situation to go away quietly. Marcus will make restitution. Tyler will face appropriate consequences for his actions. The family business will continue operating. End of discussion. I realized then that this wasn't about money or theft, or even justice. This was about power and control, and the preservation of the family hierarchy that had always placed Marcus above everyone else. I walked out of that house knowing that my family had chosen Marcus over Tyler lies, over truth, self-preservation, over justice. But I also walked out with a new understanding of exactly what I was fighting against. The war had begun, and I was prepared to fight it alone if necessary. I hired Jennifer Walsh, the best criminal defense attorney in the county, the day after my family meeting from hell. Jennifer was a sharp woman in her 40s who had built a reputation for defending clients against overzealous prosecutors and corrupt police practices. Her initial assessment of Tyler's case was devastating. Brett, I have to be honest with you, she said across her polished desk, Tyler's case file spread between us. The prosecution has built a compelling narrative. They have security footage witness statements from your parents' financial records showing unexplained deposits into Tyler's savings account and what appears to be his signature on multiple fraudulent documents. The deposits were from his summer construction jobs, I protested. The signatures are forged. The witness statements are lies. Jennifer nodded sympathetically. I believe you. But proving that in court will be extremely difficult. Your parents are respected members of the community with no apparent motive to lie. The signatures, while potentially questionable, will require expensive handwriting analysis that may or may not be conclusive, and the circumstantial evidence creates a pattern that a jury might find convincing. What about the evidence of Marcus's embezzlement? I asked. That's where things get complicated, Jennifer replied grimly. I've tried to present your findings to the district attorney's office, but they're not interested in pursuing charges against Marcus. They claim your evidence is speculation, and that you're a desperate father trying to deflect blame onto your brother. Have you spoken with Detective Coleman about investigating Marcus? Jennifer's expression darkened. Detective Coleman has been less than cooperative. He seems convinced that Tyler is guilty, and that any evidence pointing toward Marcus is fabricated or misinterpreted. He's told prosecutors that you've been harassing your family members with false accusations. Ray Coleman had been assigned to Tyler's case from the beginning. A veteran detective in his 50s, Coleman had a reputation for thorough investigations and fair dealing. But his attitude toward our family seemed strangely biased from the start. Can we request a different detective? I asked. We can try, but Coleman has seniority and experience with white-collar crimes. Plus, reassigning detectives mid-investigation requires probable cause of misconduct or bias, which we can't prove. Jennifer leaned back in her chair, studying Tyler's file. There's something else you need to know. The district attorney's office is considering charging Tyler as an adult due to the dollar amount involved. If convicted, he could face 5 to 10 years in state prison. My world tilted sideways. My 16-year-old son, who had never even received a detention at school, was facing a decade in prison for crimes he didn't commit, while the real criminal was being protected by his own parents. There has to be something we can do, I said desperately. We fight, Jennifer replied firmly. We challenge every piece of evidence we expose the inconsistencies in the prosecution's case, and we hope the jury sees reasonable doubt. But Brett, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that we might lose. The system isn't always fair, especially when family dynamics complicate the narrative. That afternoon, I decided to approach Detective Coleman directly. I found him at the police station, a stocky man with graying hair and tired eyes. When I introduced myself, his demeanor immediately became defensive. Mr. Williamson, you shouldn't be here discussing an active investigation, Coleman said curtly. I have new evidence that proves my son's innocence, I began. What you have are accusations against your brother that you can't substantiate, Coleman interrupted. I've reviewed your so-called evidence. Financial irregularities could mean anything. Document inconsistencies happen in family businesses all the time. What you don't have is proof that your brother committed any crimes. The forged signatures could have been forged by anyone, including your son. Could have been legitimate signatures that you're claiming are forged. Could be innocent mistakes or document mix-ups. None of it constitutes evidence of criminal activity by Marcus Williamson. I studied Coleman's face as he spoke, noting the way he avoided eye contact and seemed eager to end our conversation. Something about his attitude felt personal, not professional. Detective Coleman, have you actually investigated Marcus's activities? Have you interviewed his employees? Have you examined his financial records? Mr. Williamson, I'm going to ask you to leave now. Any further communication should go through your attorney. And I strongly advise you to stop harassing your family members with these conspiracy theories. That kind of behavior won't help your son's case. As I walked out of the police station, I felt a growing certainty that Detective Coleman wasn't just uninterested in investigating Marcus. He was actively protecting him. That evening, I began researching Coleman's background and discovered something that made my blood run cold. Ray Coleman had graduated from our local high school the same year as Marcus. They had been teammates on the football team that won the state championship in 1991. I pulled up old yearbooks and newspaper clippings confirming that Coleman and Marcus had been close friends throughout high school. They had attended the same parties, dated girls from the same social circles, and maintained their friendship well into adulthood. Phone records which I obtained through a private investigator showed dozens of calls between Coleman and Marcus since Tyler's arrest. Text messages revealed a relationship that went far beyond professional courtesy. The entire investigation had been compromised from the beginning. Coleman wasn't investigating Tyler's case objectively. He was helping Marcus cover his tracks while building a prosecution case against my son. When I presented this information to Jennifer, she was stunned, but not optimistic. "This is serious misconduct," she said. "But proving it will be nearly impossible. Coleman can claim he was keeping Marcus informed about the investigation as a courtesy to the family. The phone calls could be explained as standard victim notification procedures. Without recordings of their conversations, we can't prove conspiracy. So Coleman gets away with corruption, and Tyler goes to prison. Unless we can find stronger evidence of misconduct or unless Marcus decides to tell the truth, Tyler's case looks increasingly difficult." That night, Sarah confronted me with divorce papers. "I can't watch this destroy our family," she said through tears. "Your relatives have already destroyed Tyler's life, and now they're destroying Emma's childhood and our marriage. I'm taking Emma to my sister's house until this is resolved." "Sarah, please, we can't give up now. Tyler needs us to fight for him. Tyler needs his father to accept reality and negotiate a plea deal instead of chasing conspiracy theories about corrupt police and criminal family members," Sarah replied harshly. Jennifer told me the prosecution offered a plea bargain. Tyler could serve 2 years in juvenile detention instead of 5 to 10 years in adult prison. "Take the deal, Brett. Save what's left of our family." As I watched Sarah pack Emma's clothes that night, I realized that Marcus's plan was working perfectly. He hadn't just framed Tyler for theft, he had orchestrated the destruction of my entire family, while positioning himself as the tragic victim of circumstances beyond his control. But I wasn't ready to surrender. If anything, the depth of the conspiracy only strengthened my resolve to expose the truth and clear Tyler's name no matter what it cost me personally. With my marriage collapsing and my son facing adult prosecution, I realized that fighting through official channels was hopeless. Coleman would never investigate Marcus honestly. My parents would never admit their complicity. The prosecutors would never question a case that seemed so straightforward from their perspective. So I stopped fighting fair. I started by purchasing voice recording equipment and hidden cameras, preparing to document every conversation with my family members. If I couldn't prove Marcus's guilt through official investigations, I would create my own evidence. The opportunity came when Marcus invited me to lunch, ostensibly to discuss finding common ground for Tyler's sake. We met at Giuseppe's, a quiet Italian restaurant where we could talk privately. Marcus played his role perfectly, expressing concern for Tyler while maintaining his innocence. "Brett, I know this situation is tearing the family apart." He began, his voice heavy with false sincerity. "I keep thinking about what I could have done differently to prevent Tyler from getting involved in something like this." "You could start by telling the truth about who actually stole the equipment," I replied, my hidden recorder capturing every word. Marcus shook his head sadly. "I wish there was some other explanation, but the evidence speaks for itself. Tyler made some poor choices, and now we all have to live with the consequences." I pushed harder, hoping to provoke him into revealing something useful. "Marcus, I've found evidence that you've been embezzling from the company for months. Forged documents, inflated invoices, missing inventory. How do you explain that?" For a brief moment, Marcus's mask slipped, and I saw something cold and calculating in his eyes. "You're reaching, Brett. You're so desperate to save Tyler that you're willing to destroy anyone who gets in your way, even your own brother." "I'm trying to save an innocent kid from going to prison for crimes you committed." Marcus leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Tyler isn't as innocent as you think. Do you really believe a 16-year-old boy doesn't know the difference between right and wrong? Do you really think he didn't understand that taking company equipment was theft?" The recording device captured his admission that Tyler had taken company equipment, but in context, it still supported Marcus's version of events, rather than contradicting it. Over the next 2 weeks, I recorded multiple conversations with Marcus, each one more frustrating than the last. He was too smart to explicitly confess his crimes, and too experienced at manipulation to be trapped by leading questions. But then I discovered something that changed everything. While researching the company's client contracts, I found records for a project I had never heard of, the Wounded Warrior Housing Initiative. According to our files, Williamson Construction had been awarded a federal contract to provide materials and labor for building homes for disabled veterans. The project was funded through a combination of federal grants and private donations, with strict oversight requirements and detailed reporting obligations. The contract was worth nearly $200,000, making it one of our largest government projects. But when I visited the construction site, I found a half-finished development with substandard materials and shoddy workmanship. The project manager, a veteran named David Chen, told me a disturbing story. "We've been having problems with missing materials for months," David explained. "High-quality lumber gets delivered in the morning and disappears by evening. Electrical components, plumbing fixtures, roofing materials, all of it just vanishes. We keep requisitioning replacements, but the budget is getting stretched thin." "Have you reported the thefts?" I asked. "Multiple times. Your brother Marcus keeps promising to investigate, but nothing ever comes of it. Meanwhile, we're falling behind schedule and running out of money." I spent 3 hours reviewing project records and quickly discovered a pattern that made me sick to my stomach. Premium materials were being delivered to the Veterans Housing Project, documented on delivery receipts, and then immediately transferred to other job sites through work orders signed with Marcus's authorization. The veterans were getting cheap substitutes, while the expensive materials they had paid for were being used on profitable private contracts. The difference in material costs was being pocketed by Marcus through a network of shell companies and fake invoicing schemes. But it got worse. Federal grants for the Veterans Project were being diverted through fraudulent billing practices. Equipment rentals that were supposed to support the veterans' housing construction were being billed to the federal government, while the actual equipment was being used on private jobs that generated additional revenue. Marcus wasn't just stealing from our family business, he was stealing from disabled veterans and defrauding the federal government. The scope of his crimes was staggering, with potential penalties that would put him in federal prison for decades. I contacted FBI agent Lisa Rodriguez the same day I discovered the Veterans Project fraud. Agent Rodriguez specialized in federal grant fraud and government contract violations, and she was immediately interested in my evidence. "Mr. Williamson, what you're describing constitutes multiple federal felonies," she told me during our first meeting. "Theft from federal programs, conspiracy to defraud, the government, wire fraud, mail fraud, and violation of veterans' benefit programs. If proven, these charges carry mandatory minimum sentences." "How long would it take to investigate?" "That depends on the cooperation we receive and the quality of the evidence. But federal investigations take priority over local prosecutions. If we can establish probable cause for federal charges, the local district attorney's office will be required to defer to federal jurisdiction." For the first time since Tyler's arrest, I felt a glimmer of hope. Federal authorities wouldn't be influenced by local corruption or family politics. They would investigate Marcus's crimes objectively, and if convicted, he would face consequences proportional to the damage he had caused. But Agent Rodriguez also delivered sobering news. "Mr. Williamson, you should know that we've already received a complaint about you from local law enforcement. Detective Coleman contacted our office last week to report that you've been making false accusations against family members and interfering with a local investigation." My heart sank. "What kind of complaint?" "Coleman claims you've been harassing your brother and parents, making unfounded allegations of criminal activity, and attempting to obstruct justice by pressuring witnesses to change their testimony. He's requested that we investigate you for federal charges related to intimidating witnesses in a pending prosecution." Marcus had been 2 steps ahead of me the entire time. He had used Coleman's connections to poison my reputation with federal authorities before I could present my evidence. Now Agent Rodriguez would have to investigate me as a potential suspect before she could seriously consider my allegations against Marcus. But I had one advantage Marcus didn't know about. I had been documenting everything from the beginning. My recorded conversations, my financial analysis, my interviews with construction workers, and my photographs of the Veterans Housing Project created a comprehensive record that would be difficult to dismiss as the fantasies of a desperate father. Agent Rodriguez, I understand your concerns about my motives and credibility, but I'm prepared to submit to a polygraph examination, provide complete financial disclosure, and cooperate fully with any investigation of my activities. All I ask is that you examine the evidence objectively. Agent Rodriguez studied me carefully. Mr. Williamson, federal law enforcement doesn't make decisions based on family dynamics or local politics. If crimes have been committed, we'll prosecute them regardless of who the perpetrator might be. But if you've filed false reports or wasted federal resources, you'll face prosecution as well. I walked out of the FBI field office knowing that I had started a process that could either clear Tyler's name or destroy what remained of my life. But I also walked out knowing that Marcus's crimes were finally being investigated by people who couldn't be bought, intimidated, or manipulated through small-town connections. The real war was just beginning. I requested a family meeting for the following Sunday, ostensibly, to discuss Tyler's plea bargain options. In reality, I planned to present Marcus with an ultimatum: confess everything and cooperate with federal investigators or face the full consequences of his crimes when the FBI finished their investigation. The meeting was held at my parents' house, the same living room where they had first revealed their complicity in Marcus's cover-up. I arrived with a briefcase full of evidence prepared to lay out the complete scope of Marcus's federal crimes. But as I walked through the front door, I realized I had underestimated my family's desperation one final time. My parents and Marcus were waiting in the living room with 3 unexpected guests: Dr. Nathan Cross, my mother's younger brother, and the family physician who had treated us since childhood, Judge William Hayes, a longtime family friend, and my father's golf partner, and 2 men in hospital uniforms who introduced themselves as mental health technicians. Brett. My father began solemnly, "We're here because we love you and we're concerned about your mental health." I looked around the room, my mind racing to process what was happening. "What are you talking about?" Dr. Cross opened a medical file and began reading in his professional voice. "Brett, over the past several weeks, your family has documented concerning changes in your behavior. Paranoid ideation, obsessive thinking, inability to accept reality, aggressive confrontation with family members, and what appears to be a complete break from rational thought processes." "You're joking," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I realized they weren't joking at all. Patricia pulled out a notebook filled with handwritten observations. Dates and times when you made irrational accusations against Marcus. Instances when you threatened family members with legal action based on imaginary crimes. Episodes where you insisted that Tyler was innocent despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Marcus nodded gravely. "Brett, you've been under tremendous stress since Tyler's arrest. It's understandable that you would want to find someone else to blame, but your accusations against me have become increasingly elaborate and disconnected from reality." Judge Hayes cleared his throat and opened a legal folder. "I've signed emergency commitment papers based on Dr. Cross's medical evaluation and sworn statements from your family members. The mental health technicians are here to escort you to Riverside Psychiatric Facility for a 72-hour evaluation." The room seemed to spin around me as I realized the full scope of their plan. They weren't just covering up Marcus's crimes anymore. They were actively destroying my credibility and removing my ability to fight back. "This is insane," I said, backing toward the door. "You're having me committed to a psychiatric facility to cover up federal crimes?" "We're getting you the help you need," Robert replied firmly. "Your inability to accept Tyler's guilt has driven you to create an elaborate conspiracy theory involving your brother, the police, federal authorities, and multiple family members. That kind of delusional thinking requires professional intervention. Dr. Cross approached me with practiced calm. Brett, I've been documenting your mental state for several weeks. Your mother has been calling me regularly with concerns about your behavior. The paranoid accusations, the elaborate theories about frame jobs and corruption, the inability to accept clear evidence. These are classic symptoms of acute stress psychosis. I stared at my uncle in disbelief. You've been documenting my mental state without my knowledge or consent. Your mother asked me to monitor the situation as a concerned family physician. Dr. Cross replied smoothly. When family members report dramatic personality changes and delusional thinking, medical intervention becomes necessary. Judge Hayes stood up, commitment papers in hand. Brett, you can come voluntarily, or the technicians will escort you involuntarily. Either way, you're going to receive the mental health evaluation that your family believes you need. The mental health technicians moved closer, and I realized that everyone in the room was positioned to prevent me from leaving. They had planned this ambush, carefully coordinating with medical professionals and judicial authorities to create an ironclad legal framework for my commitment. You can't do this, I said desperately. I have evidence of federal crimes. I'm working with FBI agent Rodriguez. There are recordings, documents, financial records, all of which will be here when you return from treatment, Robert said gently. If your evidence is legitimate, it will still be legitimate after you've received professional help for your mental health issues. But I knew better. Once I was committed to a psychiatric facility, my credibility would be destroyed forever. Any evidence I presented would be dismissed as the fabrications of a mentally unstable man. Agent Rodriguez would close her investigation once she learned about my psychiatric commitment. Marcus would be free to continue his crimes while Tyler went to prison for being in the wrong family at the wrong time. I looked around the room one final time, seeing clearly how each person had contributed to this moment. Dr. Cross had provided the medical justification. Judge Hayes had provided the legal authority. The mental health technicians would provide the physical force. My parents had provided the family testimony, and Marcus had orchestrated the entire conspiracy to protect himself from federal prosecution. Just as the technicians began moving toward me, I heard Sarah's voice from the front hallway. Brett, are you here? Your truck was in the driveway, but... Her voice trailed off as she entered the living room and saw the scene unfolding. Sarah, Judge Hayes said warmly. Perfect timing. We were just explaining to Brett that he needs professional help for his mental health issues. Sarah looked around the room, taking in the commitment papers, the hospital technicians, and the expressions on everyone's faces. What kind of mental health issues? She asked carefully. Paranoid delusions, aggressive behavior, inability to accept reality. Dr. Cross explained. Your husband has been making increasingly irrational accusations against family members. He needs immediate psychiatric evaluation and treatment. I watched Sarah's face as she processed this information, praying she would see through their manipulation. What accusations? Sarah asked. He claims Marcus has been embezzling from the company and framing Tyler for federal crimes, Patricia explained sadly. He insists there's some elaborate conspiracy involving corrupt police officers and government officials. It's heartbreaking to watch someone you love lose touch with reality like this. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, and I held my breath waiting for her response. Actually, Sarah said slowly, Detective Coleman visited me at my sister's house yesterday. He wanted to ask some questions about Brett's mental state and whether I had noticed any concerning changes in his behavior. My heart sank. Coleman had gotten to Sarah before this meeting, poisoning her against me, just as he had poisoned the FBI investigation. He seemed very concerned. Sarah continued. He mentioned that Brett had been making wild accusations and interfering with Tyler's case. He suggested that Brett might need professional help. Judge Hayes nodded approvingly. Detective Coleman is looking out for the whole family's welfare. He understands that mental health issues can be just as serious as any other medical emergency. That's why he gave me this, Sarah said, pulling a small digital recording device from her purse. The room went silent as everyone stared at the device in Sarah's hand. Detective Coleman asked me to record any conversations with Brett where he made irrational accusations or displayed paranoid behavior. He thought it might help build a case for getting Brett the mental health treatment he needs. I closed my eyes, feeling the final trap closing around me. Even my own wife had been turned against me. But then Sarah pressed the play button, and Detective Coleman's voice filled the room. Mrs. Williamson, your husband, has been interfering with an active investigation and making false accusations against respected family members. We need documented evidence of his mental instability to justify involuntary commitment proceedings. The recording continued with Coleman explaining exactly how Sarah should manipulate our conversations to create evidence of my supposed mental illness. His instructions were detailed and specific, clearly indicating premeditation and coordination with my family's commitment plans. The expressions in the room shifted dramatically as everyone realized what they were hearing. Detective Coleman contacted me 3 days ago, Sarah said firmly. He outlined this entire plan, including the involvement of Dr. Cross and Judge Hayes. He said Marcus needed protection from false accusations, and the easiest way to accomplish that was to have Brett declared mentally incompetent. She looked directly at me for the first time since entering the room. When someone tries to convince me to lie about my husband's mental health, it makes me wonder what they're really trying to hide. The mental health technicians looked confused and uncomfortable. Judge Hayes was studying his commitment papers with obvious concern. Dr. Cross appeared to be reconsidering his medical evaluation. But Marcus just smiled coldly. Sarah, you're obviously distraught and confused. Detective Coleman was trying to help our family through a difficult situation. Your recording doesn't prove anything except that law enforcement was concerned about Brett's deteriorating mental state. Actually, Sarah replied, pulling out her phone. I recorded my entire conversation with Detective Coleman, including the part where he explained that Marcus had asked him to find a way to neutralize Brett's federal investigation. Marcus's smile disappeared. I also recorded Detective Coleman describing his high school friendship with Marcus and how he owed Marcus multiple favors from over the years, including covering up Marcus's drunk driving arrest 5 years ago and his involvement in insurance fraud related to a construction accident. The room was completely silent now, with everyone staring at Sarah as she continued. Detective Coleman was very thorough in explaining how corrupt police investigations work and how easy it is to manipulate mental health commitment proceedings when you have cooperative family members and compliant medical professionals. Sarah looked around the room at each person involved in the conspiracy. So yes, I do think Brett needs professional help, but not the kind you're offering. She moved to my side, taking my arm. We're leaving now, and if anyone tries to stop us, they'll be doing it on a recording that's already been uploaded to multiple cloud storage accounts. As we walked out of my parents' house together, I realized that Sarah had not only saved me from psychiatric commitment, she had also provided the evidence Agent Rodriguez would need to prosecute everyone involved in the conspiracy against Tyler and me. The war was far from over, but for the first time, I wasn't fighting it alone. The next morning, Sarah and I sat in Agent Rodriguez's office with the complete recording of Detective Coleman's conspiracy confession. Agent Rodriguez listened to the entire conversation without speaking, taking notes, and occasionally pausing to replay specific sections. Mrs. Williamson, Agent Rodriguez, finally said, "This recording changes everything. What you've documented here constitutes federal civil rights violations, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and abuse of process under color of law." "What does that mean for Tyler's case?" Sarah asked. "It means the local prosecution becomes irrelevant. We now have evidence of a criminal conspiracy involving law enforcement, judicial misconduct, medical fraud, and systematic violation of civil rights. Everyone involved will face federal charges." Agent Rodriguez opened a thick file folder. "Mr. Williamson, I should also tell you that we've been investigating your claims about the Veterans Housing Project for the past 2 weeks. We've found evidence supporting everything you reported and more. She spread photographs and financial documents across her desk. Your brother has been operating what we call a ghost contract scheme. Federal money is being used to purchase materials that never reach their intended destination. Instead, they're being diverted to private projects, where they generate additional revenue that disappears into offshore accounts. How much money are we talking about? I asked. Conservative estimate over $400,000 in direct theft from federal programs, plus another $200,000 in fraudulent billing and inflated contract costs. But the scheme has been operating for almost 2 years, so the final total will likely exceed $1 million. Sarah gasped. Tyler was going to prison for supposedly stealing $30,000 worth of equipment, while Marcus actually stole over $1 million. That's correct, Agent Rodriguez confirmed. And the Veterans Housing Project fraud carries mandatory minimum sentencing under federal law. Even with a plea agreement, Marcus would face 15 to 20 years in federal prison. Agent Rodriguez leaned forward. But there's something else you need to know. We didn't discover the Veterans Project fraud through your investigation. We've been monitoring Marcus's activities for 6 months as part of a larger investigation into government contract fraud in this region. I stared at her in confusion. You already knew. We knew Marcus was stealing from federal programs. What we didn't know was that he was also framing family members for local crimes to deflect attention from his federal activities. Your son's arrest was actually what first alerted us to the connection between Marcus's federal crimes and the local conspiracy. Agent Rodriguez pulled out another file. Tyler's arrest generated automated flags in our system because it involved someone with access to federal contract sites where we had identified suspicious activity. When we investigated the local charges, we discovered irregularities that suggested the case was being manipulated. You mean Tyler was never really in danger of going to prison? Tyler was in very real danger because local prosecutors didn't know about our federal investigation. Detective Coleman's corruption allowed Marcus to control the narrative at the local level while we gathered evidence for federal charges. Agent Rodriguez stood up and walked to her office door. But we're ready to move forward now. Sarah's recording gives us everything we need to prosecute the entire conspiracy. She opened the door and gestured to someone in the hallway. Please come in. Detective Coleman walked into the office in handcuffs, escorted by 2 federal agents. His face was pale, and his usual confidence had evaporated completely. Detective Coleman has agreed to cooperate fully with our investigation in exchange for a reduced sentence. Agent Rodriguez explained. He's provided detailed testimony about Marcus's criminal activities, the conspiracy to frame Tyler, and the planned psychiatric commitment scheme. Coleman wouldn't meet my eyes as Agent Rodriguez continued. We arrested Marcus at the construction site this morning. He was in the process of transferring another shipment of materials from the Veterans Project to a private job site. We have him on video committing federal crimes with GPS tracking data, showing the systematic diversion of government resources. What about my parents and Dr. Cross and Judge Hayes? They'll all face federal charges appropriate to their level of involvement. Judge Hayes will likely face the most serious consequences for judicial corruption and abuse of process. Dr. Cross will lose his medical license and face charges for fraudulent medical reporting. Your parents will likely receive probation and community service as first-time offenders who cooperated once confronted with evidence. Agent Rodriguez returned to her desk and pulled out a legal document. Tyler's charges have been dropped completely. The local district attorney's office issued a public apology this morning and announced a comprehensive review of all cases involving Detective Coleman. I felt years of tension and fear drain from my body. Tyler is free. Tyler was never guilty of anything except having the misfortune to be related to Marcus, Agent Rodriguez replied. He'll actually be receiving a commendation from the Veterans Administration for his inadvertent role in exposing the theft from disabled veterans' housing programs. Sarah squeezed my hand. When will Marcus face trial? He won't. Marcus has already agreed to plead guilty to all charges in exchange for a 25-year sentence instead of life imprisonment. He'll also forfeit all assets to pay restitution to victims, including the veterans who were deprived of proper housing materials. Agent Rodriguez gathered her files. There's one more thing. The FBI is recommending Tyler for a scholarship program specifically designed for young people who have shown courage and integrity in the face of adversity. The Veterans Administration wants to offer him a summer internship, working on housing projects for disabled veterans. Tyler would love that, Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. As we left the FBI office, I realized that Marcus's plan to destroy Tyler's life had actually opened opportunities that never would have existed otherwise. Tyler would graduate high school as a hero rather than a criminal, with college scholarships and career opportunities that valued his character rather than his family connections. The irony was perfect. Marcus's attempt to frame Tyler for theft had exposed Marcus's much larger crimes and ultimately destroyed everything Marcus had worked to build. Justice wasn't just served, it was served with a poetic completeness that no fiction writer could have crafted more satisfyingly. 6 months later, I stood in the auditorium of Tyler's high school watching my son receive his diploma. But this wasn't just any graduation ceremony. It was being held at the newly completed Wounded Warrior Veterans Center, built with materials that Marcus had stolen, and which the federal government had replaced at double cost to ensure the highest quality construction. Tyler had insisted on holding his graduation at the Veterans Center as a way of honoring the men and women whose housing project had been delayed by Marcus's crimes. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. My son was celebrating his educational achievement in a building that represented triumph over corruption and dedication to service. Agent Rodriguez attended the ceremony along with several veterans who had spoken about Tyler's role in exposing the theft from their housing program. David Chen, the project manager who had first told me about missing materials, presented Tyler with a special recognition award from the Veterans Administration. Tyler Williamson represents the best qualities of American youth, David said during his speech. When faced with false accusations and family betrayal, he never lost faith in the truth or his own integrity. His strength in the face of injustice inspired everyone involved in this case to keep fighting for what was right. The audience gave Tyler a standing ovation as he accepted his diploma, and I felt pride beyond anything I had ever experienced as a father. Marcus was serving his 25-year sentence in federal prison with no possibility of parole before 20 years. Detective Coleman received 8 years for civil rights violations and obstruction of justice. Judge Hayes was stripped of his judicial position and received 5 years in prison for corruption. Dr. Cross lost his medical license and received 3 years probation for filing false medical reports. My parents faced the lightest consequences, receiving 2 years probation and 500 hours of community service at veterans organizations. The judge noted that their cooperation with federal investigators and their genuine remorse for their actions warranted leniency, especially given their ages and lack of prior criminal history. The family construction business was dissolved with all assets sold to pay restitution to victims of Marcus's crimes. But from the ashes of Williamson Construction, something better had emerged. I had started a new accounting firm specializing in non-profit organizations and government contractors, using my experience with Marcus's case to help other organizations protect themselves from internal fraud. The business was thriving with clients who appreciated my commitment to transparency and ethical practices. Tyler was attending college on a full scholarship from the Veterans Administration, studying construction management with a focus on affordable housing development. He spent his summers working on veterans' housing projects across the country, turning his traumatic experience into a lifelong dedication to service. Sarah and I had emerged from the crisis with a stronger marriage, having learned that we could trust each other completely, even when everything else seemed to be falling apart. Emma, who had been largely shielded from the worst of the family drama, was thriving in school and showed no lasting effects from the turmoil. But perhaps the most meaningful change was in my relationship with my parents. During their probation period, Robert and Patricia had attended extensive counseling to address the family dynamics that had allowed Marcus's crimes to continue for so long. They had also volunteered hundreds of additional hours beyond their court-mandated community service, working with organizations that helped families affected by criminal justice issues. Through that work, they had gained perspective on how their actions had nearly destroyed Tyler's life and torn apart our family. Brett. My father said to me after Tyler's graduation ceremony, "I want you to know that not a day goes by that I don't regret what we put you and Tyler through. We let our fear of losing the family business cloud our judgment about right and wrong." My mother nodded, tears in her eyes. "We chose Marcus over Tyler because we were afraid of change and afraid of admitting that we had raised a son capable of such terrible crimes. We almost sacrificed our grandson to protect our own pride. The important thing is that you recognized your mistakes and worked to make amends," I replied. "Tyler has forgiven you, and so have I. We're still a family, even if it's a different family than before." The reconciliation wasn't complete. There would always be scars from the betrayal and pain we had all experienced. But it was genuine, built on acknowledgement of past mistakes and commitment to different choices in the future. As I watched Tyler deliver his valedictorian speech that evening, I reflected on the profound lesson that had emerged from our family's crisis. Tyler spoke about integrity, courage, and the importance of standing up for truth, even when doing so requires tremendous personal sacrifice. "Sometimes the greatest betrayals come from those closest to us," Tyler said to his graduating classmates. "But those betrayals don't have to define us or destroy us. They can teach us about the kind of people we want to be and the kind of world we want to create." He looked directly at me as he continued. "My father taught me that fighting for truth isn't about winning or losing. It's about refusing to compromise your principles regardless of the consequences. Even when your own family turns against you, even when the system seems rigged, even when everyone tells you to give up, you keep fighting because some things are more important than personal comfort or family harmony." Tyler's speech received another standing ovation, and as I watched him shake hands with his principal and teachers, I realized that Marcus's attempt to destroy Tyler's life had actually forged Tyler into a young man of exceptional character and strength. The ordeal had taught Tyler lessons about integrity, justice, and perseverance that no classroom could have provided. It had shown him that doing the right thing often requires courage and sacrifice, but that the rewards of maintaining your principles extend far beyond personal benefit. As we drove home that night, Sarah reached over and took my hand. "Do you ever regret fighting back instead of accepting the plea bargain?" she asked. I thought about her question seriously. The past year had been the most difficult of our lives, filled with stress, uncertainty, fear, and pain. There had been moments when giving up seemed like the rational choice, when protecting Tyler seemed less important than preserving what remained of our family stability. But looking back, I couldn't imagine making any other choice. Tyler learned that his father would never abandon him, no matter how impossible the situation seemed. I replied. He learned that truth is worth fighting for, even when fighting seems hopeless. He learned that integrity isn't just a word, it's a way of living that requires constant courage and commitment. Sarah smiled. And he learned that good people don't always win, but they never stop trying. As we pulled into our driveway, I saw Tyler's acceptance letter to graduate school, sitting on the kitchen table, along with an internship offer from a non-profit organization that builds housing for homeless veterans. His future was bright with possibilities that had emerged directly from his willingness to endure false accusations rather than confess to crimes he didn't commit. The final irony was that Marcus, in his attempt to destroy Tyler's life, had actually provided Tyler with the experiences and credentials that would define his career and character for decades to come. Tyler was now known throughout the veterans community as a young man of exceptional integrity who had risked everything to expose corruption and protect vulnerable people. The greatest lesson of our ordeal was simple but profound. When you stand up for truth and justice, especially when doing so requires personal sacrifice, you discover strength and support you never knew existed. The community that emerged to support Tyler during his darkest moments had become a lifelong network of mentors, friends, and colleagues who shared his commitment to service and integrity. Marcus had tried to destroy Tyler's future, but he had actually launched Tyler into a future more meaningful and impactful than any of us had ever imagined possible. Sometimes the greatest victories emerge from the deepest betrayals, and sometimes the people who try to destroy you end up giving you exactly what you need to become, who you were meant to be. As I tucked Emma into bed that night, she asked me a question that perfectly captured the transformation our family had experienced. "Daddy, why did Uncle Marcus try to hurt Tyler?" "Because Uncle Marcus was scared and made bad choices," I replied. "But Tyler stayed strong and made good choices, and that's why everything worked out the way it was supposed to." "Will Tyler always make good choices?" I smiled, thinking about the young man Tyler had become through facing challenges that would have broken many adults. "Tyler will face many difficult decisions in his life, sweetheart. But he's learned that making good choices isn't always easy or comfortable. Sometimes good choices require courage and sacrifice. Tyler has that courage now, and he'll use it to help other people for the rest of his life." As I turned off Emma's light and walked down the hallway, I realized that Marcus's betrayal had given our family something invaluable: the certainty that we could survive anything, as long as we held on to our principles and supported each other through whatever challenges we might face. The scars would always be there, but they had become symbols of survival rather than reminders of trauma. We had fought for truth and justice, and won not just in the courtroom, but in the deeper battle for our family's soul and integrity. Tyler's story had become an inspiration to others facing similar injustices, and he had already begun speaking at schools and community organizations about the importance of standing up for truth, even when doing so seems impossible. The ripple effects of our fight would continue for years, touching the lives of people we might never meet, but who would benefit from Tyler's example of courage and our family's refusal to surrender in the face of overwhelming odds. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where standing up for what's right required you to fight against the people closest to you? How do you find the strength to keep going when even your own family turns against you? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. This story has shown me that we never truly know our own strength until we're forced to fight for what matters most. If this story touched your heart or taught you something about courage and family loyalty, please hit that like button and share it with others who might need to hear Tyler's message of hope and perseverance. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about real people facing extraordinary challenges and finding the strength to overcome them. Thank you for taking this journey with me and my family. Remember that no matter how dark things seem, truth has a way of emerging, justice has a way of prevailing, and good people have a way of finding each other when it matters most. Until next time, keep fighting for what's right, even when fighting feels impossible.